Basically, I'm talking about the use of AI and camera traps in order to try and understand, particularly koala, but really all wildlife, road crossing behaviours and how we can use that to help mitigate against vehicle strike. Very brief rundown, you probably all already know this, but urbanisation's had a really significant impact on all sorts of local wildlife populations, including koalas. I like to show this figure. Basically, you've got human population densities on the left. As you probably know, Australia's a really, the population is really concentrated along the coastal fringe. And sadly for the koala, they also really like that sort of same strip of the landscape. And so there's a lot of conflict between humans and, human land use and koalas. And so you get all these impacts like drownings, trappings, and getting hit by cars, dogs, all that sort of stuff. And it's had a dramatic impact on local wildlife populations, much like with platypus now. Koalas were relatively misunderstood despite all of the publicity that they get. We didn't really know, and we still really don't know nationwide what's going on in koala populations. In Queensland, really, there's only two populations that we understand pretty well, and they're the Koala Coast, so sort of the Redlands, Logan, Brisbane corner, and Pine Rivers on the north side. And this is a study from John Rhodes and others from UQ back in 2014, where he used a lot of line transect data to show really substantial declines. For Koala Coast, on the order of 80% declines over 15 years, and for Pine Rivers, 64% decline. And one of the large drivers of koala declines is vehicle strike. Each year from 1997 to 2018, an average of 350 odd koalas enter care facilities. And what we're trying to do in order to try and reduce that mortality to try and help koala survival. Vehicle strike typically targets males. I put this figure up here just so you can see the little peaks, and those peaks basically are annual variation in koala mortality events, with the peaks occurring on average between August and November, correlating with the koala breeding season. It's mainly the males that get hit by cars. This is because they're the ones that run out looking for mates, and that's when they run into roads and get struck. Similar thing with dogs. And it's, as I said, cyclic dynamics, and most of the males that end up in hospital are either dead on arrival or die fairly quickly thereafter because the injuries from these strikes are quite traumatic. So gaining a better understanding of what's going on with koalas and road crossing behaviour requires improved tech, and there's been lots of advances lately from GPS, VHF collars, radio frequency identification, drones, camera traps. And so this is basically where we're focusing on at the moment, is camera traps. With colleagues at the School of Information Communication Technology at Griffith, we got some money from the Queensland government to develop AI-powered camera networks for koala surveillance. And basically, effectively, these are camera traps equipped with solar panels and 4G SIM modules, so they can communicate with the mobile phone network. And basically, we can deploy these out in the field. Left by themselves, by and large, they can run for about a year as long as they're not taking too many photos. Sometimes you get them where the grass or a tree branch or something will trigger them way too much. But left on their own, they have survived for a year. And I can also say during floods, we have seen them disappear under the water and stop recording. And then a couple of weeks later, once the water's receded, they start sending images again. So they're pretty robust units. Architecture of the system is basically, at present, we have them set to take 10-second videos. That's largely because what we found was taking just a single snapshot would be too blurry at night under passive infrared lighting. So we run 10-second videos at 1080p resolution. Once they're taken, they're emailed over the 4G network to service at Griffith, and then we have an AI system that runs over them, does a batch process at midnight each night, and updates to tell us what it is. The way the algorithm's currently set up is, first step is there something in the image? Is it a koala? And what we're still working on is trying to get individual recognition of koalas. It can be done. However, at present, it needs a really clear photo under really good lighting of the face. But we're trying to do all sorts of different things, looking at gait, looking at rump patterns, stuff like that. So one of the big things you need in AI is training data. In order to collect training data here, we formed a really good relationship with Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary and other wildlife parks, and we were able to go out and deploy the cameras for a year and basically just pick up images of all the wildlife that they had there. At present, we're talking, the AI has been trained on over 10,000 images of koalas. Other species to a lesser degree, some of the reasonably rare ones like bandicoots and deer, we're sort of talking still in the less than 100 training images. And obviously the number of training images you have gives some approximation of how good the AI is recognizing something. One of the timely bits here is to then, once you've got the data, to get an undergrad student to come along and label the photo. Basically that involves drawing a box around whatever you're looking at and tagging it with, this is a wallaby, this is a person, this is a person. And then we have so the AI system that we're using is based on YOLO. You only look once is the system. Basically what it does is it separates the image into a grid, produces a lot of bounding boxes, and then tries to figure out, looking within each of those bounding boxes, what's the maximum likelihood that there is something that it's been trained to recognize in there. I should stress, I'm an ecologist, not the IT side of this. And then these cameras have basically been deployed initially at a lot of fauna road crossing structures with a lot of assistance from various local councils and transport authorities in order to identify decent spots, just to try and figure out exactly where koalas were crossing, how they were crossing, were they making use of overpasses, underpasses and other infrastructure put in place, etc. So this is just some examples of the cameras in place. I'll talk specifically about the Compton Road overpass. If you know it, it's on the southeast side of Brisbane, just before you hit the boundary with Logan. It was established in 2005, I think it opened. So it's been around for a while. As you can see from that photo, it's quite well developed. And this is just some sample videos. So that's a koala with the prediction. What you can see, and that's still there, it says 0.89. So it's basically 89% sure that what it's looking at in that box is a koala. There's an example during the day. And we're also picking up things like foxes and possums. And what I have found is that effectively the AI is better at detecting what is a koala if it also has experience of what other things it might be coming across. So we did take this system up to Mackay, to the Peak Downs Highway, lots of cows, and the AI had never seen a cow before and didn't know what it was looking at when it saw a cow. So when it saw a cow, it was calling it all sorts of different things like koalas and dogs and what have you. So basically the AI development is an ongoing process, and it probably will, it's one of these things, it's an iterative development. As you deploy somewhere, you have to get some training data to see what sort of animals are there and build up from there to try and get the system optimized. So following that initial development of the AI, we then were fortunate to get another community sustainability action grant from the Queensland government for a community facilitated camera surveillance network. This allowed us to purchase 100 cameras, which we distributed to partner community groups from Koala Action Group up in Gympie, all the way down to Gecko, the Gold Coast Environment Council, Ipswich Koala Protection Society, Koala Action Group in the Redlands, etc. And so the thinking there was all these groups are on the ground. They know the spots which are a problem for koalas. Palmerston Road at Torble, real hotspot. So, I wouldn't know that sitting in Nathan, but they knew it, so they could deploy the cameras to places where they were most useful. And a large part of what we're trying to do here is answer questions like how do wildlife navigate transport infrastructure barriers? Like basically roads and rails represent a barrier to movement, disrupting gene flow. How can we try and help wildlife across these things? A lot of what's happened at the moment is engineering solutions, fauna, infrastructure, overpasses, underpasses, rope bridges. Nobody really knows how well they work, but that's a project. Transurban's just come on board with us to fund a 2-year project where we're going to be doing quite a lot of surveillance to try and build an evidence base for some of these things. One of the comparisons here is Compton Road, which I talked about before, established in 2005 versus Illawina Street, which only really came into operation 2019. You can kind of see from that picture, Compton Road at the top, lots of trees, reasonably well developed. Illawina Street is getting better, but at the time that photo was taken, it was basically shrub and undercover with understory, sorry, with no real tree development. And with the observations that we had, this figure probably doesn't make much sense to you, but basically it's separating out. The blue is the observations for Illawina Street. Red is for Compton Road. What we can see here is Illawina Street. Dominated it is by shrubs and understory. Really, the only fauna we saw there were foxes and macropods. Whereas Compton Road, 20 years more established with trees, with a real mature ecosystem, was getting echidnas, was getting koalas, was getting all sorts of stuff crossing over. So for overpasses, it's time. A lot of these things take like 20, 30. It's probably going to be 100 years before Compton Road is really doing as effectively as it can. We also, I'm just going to mention very quickly here, fencing. This is a fence along the train line at Wellington Point, where there have been 6 koala strikes in the last 3 years. And this koala and Joey came out of a hole that was basically about that size. I would never have thought in a million years a koala would squeeze through that, let alone a mum with a bub. QR heard about that, went and closed up the hole, and now the mum gets to the hole, can't get her way through, and has no idea what the heck's going on, and just sits there until the video ends. This is the photo that I had at the start, and what you can see there, if you can, is that there's a koala down in the bottom right of that. That's a koala that's currently trapped on Redland Bay Road on the wrong side of an exclusion fence. And so as a result of finding this, Redland City Council went out and installed escape poles to allow koalas to get over and out. So hopefully this koala survived. We don't actually know what happened to him, but he was trapped in the road corridor. And hopefully, it won't happen again because we've got that escape pole put in. One of the things that we are now trying to take that next step is so we can see we're getting a better understanding of where koalas are crossing roads. What we want to know is how we can try and reduce vehicle strike. Effectively, there's 2 ways to do this. We can either stop the koalas getting onto the road, or we can try and get the drivers to slow down. And so we've got some money from Transport for New South Wales and the Department for Planning and Environment in New South Wales to try and develop an intelligent road sign. The benefits for signage have been really shown. So this is an example from the Redlands. It's a sign that just sort of lights up with speed. If you're going too fast, it'll light up with a slow down and a frowny koala face. And if you're going the right speed, it'll be a nice, happy green face. And we have, and the idea here being is that if we can reduce driver speed, it'll reduce koala mortality. And what we have found, this is some work that we've been doing for about 5 years now, and basically what we have demonstrated is even that small sign has, by and large, there's a couple of sites where things are changing a bit, but by and large, it did show a reduction in driver speed in response to that sign. We're moving that on to the next step. So that was just basically based on the drivers. This new thing that we're working on is linking the camera system that we've got to a roadside. So we've got a camera up on a pole with solar panel, etc. If it sees something, it's got an edge processing unit. So it's got a little computer on board that can process the AI for us. There's a lot of power constraints on that because it's remote. but we're working to try and optimize that. But basically, if it detects koalas, possums, something like that, it will then flash to a road sign about 100 metres up the road to try and get drivers to slow down. So this has been trialled at Nathan campus on the Ring Road there, if you know it, and this is currently a photo from it on Sturgeon Street down in the Redlands. So we're trying to get some data. This is actually sitting there right now. We're trying to get some data to demonstrate that we can detect an appreciable reduction in driver speed in response to this. The idea being that the more dynamic it is, the more people will respond to it and the less habituation we'll get, the less, drivers starting to ignore it if it's constantly flashing at them. Anyway, just wanted to thank the various team members involved here, Jun, Dichi, Owen on the AI, Wilam on the networking tech, and the rest of us are basically ecologists there. And there's been a bunch of funders and, importantly, the various community groups who've been involved in that project and helping us deploy cameras and checking our AI results to see how it's going and trying to improve the model all the time. And I will wrap it up there. Any questions?
Yes, there are. There is actually one in the chat here, Doug. Are you able to share what brand and model 4G wireless cameras were shown in the presentation?
Yeah, so the cameras we're currently running with is the S-Promise S688 camera, and we're currently using a Moultrie. It's a French brand solar panel, integrated solar panel and battery.
Is there any indication that wildlife gets ambushed at the few overpasses that we get by waiting predators?
I was at a meeting of road ecology 2 years ago, and there was a lot of talk that basically that's not a thing. I'm not sure I totally agree that it's not a thing. I suspect that wildlife are quite variable, and you will get the odd fox or whatever that is canny enough to know to just hang out by an underpasses in particular. Overpasses you don't hear so much, but underpasses, animals will take, a 30-metre walk through a tunnel and get ambushed on the other side. I could definitely believe that there are foxes out there who are smart enough to figure out where to sit for a free meal. But the consensus in the road ecology community is that it's not really a thing. That's just my opinion, that they may be they may not be quite right on that.
I'm just curious about, you mentioned there isn't a lot of data on the use of infrastructure, but is there any way of accessing a lot of the unpublished data? So we all work for local government and we hear a lot of information and reports that local government does monitoring infrastructure, but that none of that stuff gets published.
Yeah, I mean, there probably is a huge amount of data that we could be tapping into. The Transurban basically had some money, and it was a lot of the studies that were being funded on is because of EPBC Act obligations. And so they basically said, we've been asked to do a study on road crossing, fauna infrastructure effectiveness, put something together for us. And I think that's the sad truth is they probably don't really care. Well, the policymakers probably don't really care about this. So, yeah, I mean, yes, there's probably a huge amount of data in there. Nobody's really looking at it, and it's probably something that could be done.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Doug. The question is regarding public interaction with cameras and other equipment when they're visible. Does educational signage help, and is theft or damage of monitoring equipment an issue?
Yes, theft is an issue. We have had at least, I think, 5 or 6 units taken in their entirety and a couple of extra units taken just the solar panel off. We have, I think I put up on one of the slides, which is probably long gone now, we have a little information sign that we put next to the cameras so that people can get more information. There's like a little QR code patch that the legal people made us take across to the privacy statement. and also allows people to upload their own photos. But yeah, so increasingly what we're trying to do is, what I should start by saying is basically the camera is about $500. The solar panel is like $300, and then we've spent about $400 on equipment to try and keep it secure. But an angle grinder can get through most things, which is the sad truth. So what we are trying to do these days is install them at a sufficient height that you really need to be after them to get them. So we take out a ladder and try and put them up over, like, as far as I can reach, a bit higher again, just to try and reduce that.
Thank you.